My name is Erik Vermeulen. I'm a behavioral economic strategist, and in this video we're going to look at the second of 6 mind management principles, and we're going to be talking about why your mind is like the soil. In this second video of understanding how our mind works and how we can hack it during stressful times, we're going to look at a concept that I call your mind is like the soil. Now, if you're in agriculture, you would know that if you go and you plant milli pips or corn pips, seeds, that is what the soil will grow several weeks later. The soil doesn't decide to give you something else. If you plant millies, 6 weeks later, millies will grow. The soil doesn't decide, oh, hang on a minute, what if we give him sunflowers? And our mind works in exactly the same way. Whatever we feed our mind, whatever we feed our thought processes, is exactly what we're going to be getting back. That's why newspaper headlines are so effective. Because, remember the old days when we used to get in our car and drive to the office every day? And lampposts are plastered with news headlines. And no matter how positive and motivated you are when you wake up that morning, by the time you get to the office and you've read 6 negative news headlines over and over and over and over again, that's what your attitude becomes. That's what the talk around the coffee machine and the water cooler is all day. It's about these negative news headlines that you've read on your way to work. Many years ago, I was asked to act as mind coach to a semi-professional sports team. And at the very first session, where we had all the players of the team together, I asked them who their biggest, strongest player was. I was told his name is Bees, which is Afrikaans for ox, and it was a rugby team. This big guy came to the front. I said to him, do you mind if I do a bit of a test with you? He said, sure, go ahead. I said, I want to see how strong you are. And the test of strength would be for him to hold his arm out parallel to the ground, and using just 2 fingers, I wanted to see if I could press his arm down. And he stood in front of all his playing colleagues and friends and teammates, and I managed to press his arm down about that much. I then told him to close his eyes and to repeat the following statement 10 times. The statement was, I am weak and worthless. He looked at me a bit quizzically. He closed his eyes. He repeated that statement 10 times. I was counting. By the 5th time, his shoulders began to droop. By the 8th time, he was starting to sway on his feet. I mean, this guy was 120 kilograms of pure muscle. I asked him to pick up his hand after repeating that statement, I am weak and worthless, 10 times. He could barely lift his arm. I put my 2 fingers on his arm and I pressed it down almost to his waist repeatedly. I said, come on, I thought you said you were strong. Of course, all his teammates were stunned into silence. I then asked him to think of a time in his life when he'd been incredibly successful, one of those pinnacle moments that we all can recall in our lives. I asked him not to tell me what that moment was, but instead to close his eyes and watch that moment, to relive it like he was watching a movie in his mind's eye. I gave him 10-15 seconds to do that, and I asked him as many questions about that experience as possible. Where was it? When was it? Who was there with him? What was he wearing? What was the weather like? What were people saying to him? And after 10 or 15 seconds of doing that, I asked him to pick up his arm and to resist. And I put my fingers on his wrist and I couldn't move it an inch. In under 20 seconds, 40 seconds maybe, I'd taken Bees from being in his normal level of strength to being very weak to being super strong. And the only thing we changed was what I got him to think about. It is exactly this principle of what I say, your mind is like the soil. Whatever we put in there is what we're going to be getting straight back. What are you putting into your mind on a regular basis?